Hello, today I'm going to do a quick tutorial video about how I park my threads and cross stitch with parking. I know there's a challenge coming up very shortly on a certain Facebook group, and people have been asking questions specifically when they're working from the bottom to the top, and as I happen to be doing that now, I thought I'd just do a quick demonstration of how I'm working it. Before I start though, I've had a few questions about what needles I use. I use a John James size 26 for practically all of my stitching. It's my favourite type of needle, and I don't like to change sizes too frequently because I feel that it alters my tension. So I buy my needles like these, the packets, they call them envelopes on the website, and they're 25 needles in one envelope, and I buy a few of those at a time, which keeps me going and means I've always got needles available, although I don't tend to snap or bend them. I just have to change them because they start tarnishing on the needles and getting a bit grippy as it goes through the fabric. That's when I know I need to change them. But they're just a few pennies each, so it's not a waste of money to bin one because it's tarnished. I'd much rather do that than ruin my sewing. Back to my parking though. I go in sort of columns. So I like to look at a 10 stitch wide column, but if the colour carries on, I'll carry on into the next column, which is what I've been doing. So it gives it the feathery edge, and I know some people often say, well, what's the point of parking it if I've got one stitch to do there? I may as well do that. Well, you may as well. There's no rules with parking, none that I've come across anywhere. No one's ever told me, oh, you're doing it wrong. The only way to park is the way that works for you. So if it doesn't work for you at all, stop it. It's not working. You're just going to lose your enjoyment of stitching. I can't stitch cross country. I've tried. I just find that when I'm restricted to stitching one colour, I get so bored of it. And then I'll just get distracted by the television or the iPad. Anything other than to stitch a block of colour. So I like this. It keeps me focused on an area. I don't start planning routes through the whole page or the whole project and spend more time looking at the pattern than actually doing stitching. So for the way my head works, this works well for me. The other thing that I do is I try not to carry the threads too far along the back. And when you're working in this small scale, so this one's 28 count. So one 10 by 10 block on this is the equivalent of stitching 5 squares 2/2 if you're stitching anything else. If you're stitching on 14 count, it's the equivalent of a 5 block square. So if I say I'm going to take it 10 stitches and park it, it's not actually that far, it's less than an inch. So I know people say, oh, you've got long threads trailing at the back. I don't. I'll quickly show you the back. This is how mine looks. I cover over the trailing threads quite a lot, and I'll go through that in a bit. So I don't really have much in the way of loose bits at the back, and because I'm feathering across, you don't get the rigid lines. You probably see a bit here, but that was more to do with the pattern than the fact that I was stitching in columns. So I've got these threads that I've already parked. When you are just starting out, it's easy just to get your head around it just by doing a few colours. If you've got a block that's 2 or 3 colours, great, practice with that. If not, just do 2 or 3 colours in the block, just so that you got it so it clicks in your head what you're doing. So I've got a range of colours here. I've got some purples and some reds, some browns and some dark blues. I don't think I've got black here, no, it's just 2 dark blues. So I said about hiding the threads at the back. When I pick what colour I'm going to use or stitch next, it will be based on a few decisions. Sometimes, because these are hanging over the area that I'm going to work, I might be inclined to stitch this one first because it's up here, and just stitch up here. But underneath this thread is this colour. You can't tell the difference between the colours, so one's dark brown, one's a dark blue, and the other one's a slightly darker blue. You're not going to tell the difference. Now, this one here, looking at my pattern, I have a couple of stitches, and it next appears in the next block, which is probably about the limit to where I'd travel the thread, but I'm going to do it anyway. Now I'm going to stitch this bottom one first. I'll just quickly do that. It's only a couple of stitches. Stitch that one. That one. You can probably hear all the noise outside. The right place. Yep, that looks right to me. Just thought I'm doing this the wrong way around, so all you're going to see is my hand trying to stitch backwards. For me, it's quite difficult. Can't see what the left hand's doing. It always misbehaves itself on the back. It doesn't go to the right place. There we go. So that thread, that colour, is in the next block. Now, next 10 block. So I don't want to stitch with it anymore. I've having a quick look at that block. That is the only place where this colour appears. Now I could finish it off now, but I haven't got anywhere to anchor it on the back. If you do waist knots to finish, then now would be a good, I'd just finish it off and set my waist knot, but I don't do that. I weave them in at the back. Probably also noticed that I've actually done 2/3 of the stitch. So I've done the bottom leg, and then I've come out at where the top leg will start. I've actually taken it off to quickly rethread my needle. Now I'm doing it this way because this is how I work when I'm working top down, but because of where the page is, I'm working top up because I'm actually stitching the page from right to left. So people that work top down generally do their stitches, work their stitches top to bottom. So they do the top leg, and then, well, to come out to the top leg you'd come out up here. Now because I'm working third of the stitch, I'm going to leave it like that. So the reason I do this much of the stitch is it keeps the stitch firmer. When you're in the middle of the block, you have the trailing thread here, and it's easy to pull out, especially when you're fiddling around at the back, you're not looking at what you're doing, you can pull that thread through. So what I do is, working 2/3 of the stitch, it just anchors it that bit more. Now also, if I was working waist knots, I wouldn't do 2/3 of the stitch, so I'll be able to see what's my waist thread and what's the thread that I'm going to be stitching with. The other downside with working this way is your thread's going to fall across where you want to work. So to keep it out of the way, you can use a needle minder, and you can either sometimes just wrap it around that, just anything to keep the work up and out of the way. Also use these hair clips. These ones are actually quilt binding clips, and you can buy them in a big packet, and they're much cheaper than buying hair clips. They're metal, so probably won't hold on to just one strand very well, but if you put it in there, because it's metallic, it will stick onto your needle minder and keep it out of the way. I only work one column at a time, so I only have one lot of parked threads at a time. Some people will have all of it going across and coming down, and the hair clips are a good way to keep them bundled up together and out of the way while you're working. You can just unclip the set that you need to work with and keep everything else clipped, and if you use magnets, keep them out of the way of your work. So I've stitched that bottom one, go back now, and I'm going to work this next colour. And this one, logically looking at it, goes backwards and forwards across the... If I had gridded my work, you'd see that there was the end of the block line here. You can kind of make it out based on what I've stitched. So, quickly get this one in. Now I'm going to go over that invisible line, just because I may as well while I've got the needle threaded. And I think people who switch from cross-country stitching to parking, if they're trying it, the bit that they struggle with is the fact, well, they've normally got their needle threaded, so they may as well stitch it. And if it's easy enough to get to that colour or get to those stitches, then you may as well. There's no rules. It's only the way that it feels comfortable to you. I'm not going to be able to say that enough. I've played around with different ways of parking over a few years now, and this one's the one that's working well for me now. It'll probably change when I get to a different project. I haven't left enough stitches. Just pull that back. Can't talk and stitch at the same time. There we go. So because this section is going to hop backwards and forwards over the line, I may as well get it in. Now this colour also appears further across in this column, but there's other bits where I haven't stitched it because it's a bigger gap, and I'll just stitch those in the next column. I'll have that symbol still coming up anyway. So now we're coming back across, back across into this section, and because I'm working bottom to top, my stitches go top to bottom. The reason I do that is because wherever possible I want the needle to come out in a hole that hasn't got any stitching in it. Obviously as you get through your blocks, that gets a bit more difficult. The only reason I do that is because I don't want to bring the needle up through an area where it can pull up the previous part of, well, the leg of one of the previous stitches. It's just how I stitch all of my work. It decides whether I start top of the leg or at the bottom. Oops. And that's the top of that block. And I'll just get it parked up in the next one. Now when you're parking your thread, the main thing to be is consistent about where you're leaving that thread for the next leg. So because the one next to it had it at the top left corner, and the same thing, top left corner. So when I pick these threads up, I'll know which one it belongs to, especially because they're such similar colours. Just keep that out of the way there. So now I've stitched that up. What that's done on the back is it's covered over some of this trailing thread. As I get other colours in around it, that would cover up that trailing thread even more and make sure it's all secure at the back, and that's how you end up without lots of threads dragging along the back. When I work cross country, when I do that method, I always try to do the patchier, least concentrated colours first, so that I cover them up at the end with the more dominant colour. And it's just to keep the threads neat and tidy on the back, so I'm not accidentally pulling on anything. So what have we got here? So I've got one here where I've parked it in the top corner and one in the bottom corner. Luckily I know which one I'm doing. That's fine. This colour, just quickly work this one up. This colour is making up the loop thread. That's a thread from the needle in the picture, so it's just the thread trailing over the picture. So it's not actually part of the book spine. So this is just linking up what's in that other column. Let's get that done and out of the way. Done. Now this colour doesn't occur again in the block above. It does actually occur over here at the edge of this block, and there's just 4 stitches between this dark blue and the other dark blue. Now looking at the block that's adjacent to it, this colour occurs quite a lot in there. So I'm actually not going to stitch it now, and I'm going to save it for when it's on my needle in the next column across. Now I could just go ahead and stitch it and go across into the end here of the column, but I can quickly see at a glance that it also appears in the block below. So I would have this colour threaded in the next block. So I'm just going to leave it blank on this block for now, and then stitch it when I get to the next one, next column across. It saves me having the colour dragged across the back of the work. Just finish that colour off. So for that, the camera just turned off. So this colour I've actually only got 2 stitches of this in this block, and it can be finished off. Finish this thread off, and that's piece is too small to stitch with. That can go in my pot, but what I'm going to do is get the needle filled up with some more of that colour. So, because I always do it, I'll put the needle back in its place on the needle organizer, and it'll be empty, and then the next time I'll be in this flow stitching, I'll grab that needle and it will be empty, and it's just annoying, so I just refill them as I've used them up. And so now we've got 2 colours left, which are the main colours for this background. It's probably about evens the amount of stitches there are to do. I'm going to quickly go through and do them. This colour jumps about a little more, so it'd have more trailing at the back. So that's just where I decided to go with this one. Sorry if my hand keeps getting in the way of the stitch and I really can't stitch the other way. There's plenty of videos if you want to watch me just stitch. Also, it's probably now a good time to mention that on my blog, and I'll put the link in the description block below, I think blog link's always there. On my blog I've got a page on my parking guide. Now that's a bit out of date now, because I think at that time I was just parking, just leaving it ready to start the next stitch, whereas obviously now I do 3/4 of it before I park, but that could also help if you like to look at lots of pictures and writing explaining what I'm doing. That's there. I think also on the blog I've got a description of how I grid my work. I do grid sometimes, I didn't for this one, I was just in too much of a rush to get started. But I think I've managed quite well without gridding, so who knows, I might try doing without it some more. If I do grid though, what I do is I only do the outlines of the pages, and then as I get more, as I get to each page, I will grid the page. just saves a bit of time. You're not gridding everything from the start. The fun of starting's in the starting rather than the preparation of it for me. Nearly there. That seemed to go too far. It seems to have gone into the next square, so just unpick that. Don't usually set out to keep the backs of the work neat, even though they usually are fairly neat and tidy, but I do like to make sure that the front of the work is neat with the colours going into the right holes. The bit I'm doing now is a book spine, and in the next column across this different element, I think it's a stack of bobbins, so you do get quite a definite edge to the column. Now this colour does carry on up into the next block. Obviously this bit of thread is getting a bit too short to work with. I won't want to park that size. So quickly finish it off. Run it under a couple of stitches and just through a few more. Just loop it round. Trim that off. Now this is going to be in the next block, so I might as well thread my needle and get my thread parked ready to start in the next block. It's going to have to get started at some point, so I might as well start it now. And again, that's the good thing about doing a 3/4 start, because I can get the thread secured. I've gone through it, I think. Right. Something so small I actually managed to pierce the thread. There we go. And zip needle back through that hole, and it's just a little lasso style I do, so hopefully you can see this. Got a little bit of the tail hanging, and I get it so it is trapped underneath the loop because I'm trying to do it carefully. Won't do it. Let's try again. There we go. Trap it, catch center it and loop it over it, keeps it secure. And so that one's parked, ready for next time. So quickly go back to the back. That will get stitched over as I work. I'm going to bring the last colour up now. There's not a lot of carried thread, they don't carry very far, it's only 1 or 2 stitches. This will just cover everything over and neaten it all up. I can see that I have 2 stitches of one colour that I haven't started, that I don't have parked, but I'm just going to do that at the end. Now this bit is quite easy because I've only got because I've only got a few colours, so it's not quite so dense. When I was doing the bit down here with the cat, there's a lot of colours, so when it gets like that and there's so many colours in a block, I'll sometimes work up a couple of blocks before parking the thread, or even if I park at all, I'll just do one colour and just do cross country in that small area that I'm working on. It's just another technique, another tool to make stitching simpler, less complicated. So that's why I like it. I can adapt it to the way the pattern wants to be stitched. I often find with these big ones, I don't really get into them until I know how the pattern actually wants to be stitched, whether it wants me to work up and down in columns or if it wants me to work across. It usually takes a page or 2 before I get into that routine with it. This one, I think because it's got a lot of vertical objects in the cross stitch, because it's all little rooms, so they've got walls or books dividing the rooms up. It's very much more up and down, so it's quite easy to stitch that way. And because there's so many details, it does divide itself into columns quite nicely. If it wanted to go wider, I would stitch it across more. When I get to the bit of fabric that's in the hoop, I will go across several columns at a time. It's just how it wants to work. I don't know what the rules are going to be when the challenge happens, whether it's going to stipulate stitching 10 by 10 columns, or if it's just to have some parking. You can usually adapt parking to how you want to work. So if you stitch across, you can still leave the thread for later and carry on building up the area around where you're stitching. The main thing you need to remember is that you've just left the thread where it's going to be used the next time you use it, next time you thread your needle and pick it up and use it. People see all the threads hanging down and I think it just panics. And once you give it a go, just practice with a couple of colours, 2 or 3 colours at a time, and you can gradually build your way up. It's just once that clicks and that says, rather than panicking and thinking, well, I don't know what colour that is, refer back to your chart and say, oh, it's that colour because that's where I've left it. And I think that's possibly all I can say on it. If you have any questions, just leave a comment and hopefully I'll be able to answer them, clear it up for you. if there's anything you want me to go through in a bit more detail. There are some other very good videos out there on YouTube, so have a watch, find one that explains it the way for you, have a go and find the way that works best for you. I'll be back, I think possibly next week, with an update video of how my stitching's been going this month, and I'll see you soon. Bye.